The alarm screaming through the Galactic Council's Central Observatory weren't supposed to exist. For 3,000 years, the detection grid had operated in perfect silence, a vast web of sensors spanning 12 star systems, monitoring every particle, every photon, every quantum fluctuation within Council space. The grid didn't detect threats. It predicted them weeks in advance down to the nancon. Until today, impossible. High Analyst Vor whispered, his crystalline exoskeleton flickering with distress patterns, his 4 eyes dart across holographic displays that had suddenly transformed from orderly data streams into cascading walls of error. Messages, the mathematics there, contradicting themselves. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 50 species stood, frozen. The Zenthuri, masters of quantum mechanics, the Krill Dominion, who had mapped 11 dimensions before most species discovered fire, the photonic collective, beings of pure energy who existed partially outside normal space-time. All of them were staring at the same thing at the center of the holographic display, where there should have been nothing but empty void. Something existed, not appeared. Existed as if it had always been there. And reality was only now catching up to notice. Retroactive manifestation. Breathed Council Director Jakara, her tentacles coiling in involuntary fear. The object's arrival signature is propagating backwards through our sensor logs. It's rewriting our past observations. That violates causality. Vor said flatly. I'm aware, Jakara snapped. Tell that to the readings. The object was a vessel roughly 2 km long, angular and dark, with surfaces that seem to absorb light in ways that made quantum physicists weep. It wasn't cloaking technology bent light around an object, creating detectable gravitational lensing. This ship simply wasn't there until you looked directly at it, and when you did look, the number stopped making sense. Energy signature. Shakara demanded. None detected. Vor replied, manipulating holographic controls with trembling appendages. No fusion reactions, no antimatter annihilation, no 0 point fluctuations. According to our instruments, that vessel is producing exactly 0 joules of energy. Then how is it moving? It isn't. According to spatial tracking, it's perfectly stationary, but we can see it moving. Yes. A long silence filled the chamber. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Krenel of the Photonic Collective, his voice like wind chimes. Our instruments are malfunctioning. All of them. Jakara's tone was sharp. Simultaneously, across 12 systems, including hardened backup arrays, specifically designed to be immune to quantum interference. Krenel had no answer. Hail them, Jakara ordered. Standard first contact protocols. Communications officer, a Trialaxian with 6 arms designed for multitasking, worked his console for several seconds before his skin turned an alarmed shade of purple. Director, the standard protocols aren't working. Define not working. I mean, the carrier wave is being rejected, not blocked, not jammed. Rejected. As if. He paused, checking his readings again, as if our transmission doesn't meet minimum requirements to qualify as communication. That's absurd. Council standard transmissions are comprehensible to any species with understanding of basic mathematics. No, Director, I'm telling you what the equipment is telling me. Before Jakara could respond, every screen in the chamber flickered. Then, without any detectable transmission without any carrier wave or quantum entanglement or subspace relay, a message simply appeared in the Council's primary database, not received, appeared as if it had always been there. The text was in perfect galactic standard: greetings from the United Earth Initiative, we come in peace. Request permission to dock and establish diplomatic relations. Ambassador Lena Cole awaits your response. Vor stared at his screens, running diagnostic after diagnostic. The message didn't travel through space, it was instantaneously written into our quantum storage matrix. Do you understand what that means? They directly manipulated our information infrastructure from 2 light hours away without any detectable transmission, without triggering a single security protocol. Who are these humans? Shakara demanded, pulling up the Council's xenological database. Computer search for species. Designation: Human Earth Sol System. The holographic display flickered, then produced a file, a very old file. Species entry logged 417 years ago. Computer intoned. Civilization class: pre-industrial, technology level. Primitive mechanical era, observation. Status: potential uplift candidate. Approximately 1500 years, last survey. 392 years ago. Conclusion: early stage. Species: no immediate threat or interest. The chamber fell silent. 400 years ago, Krenel said slowly, they were hitting each other with metal sticks, and now Vor added his voice. Hollow, they're casually violating information theory. Jakara's tentacles twisted into decision knots. Grant them permission to dock. Base 7, it's isolated and heavily shielded, and activate every sensor we have. I want to know how they're doing this, Director. Vor said quietly. What if we can't understand how they're doing this? Then, Jakara replied, watching the impossible human vessel glide silently through space toward the station. We're about to learn that the universe is far stranger than we thought. On the screens the human ship approached. It left no energy trail. It created no gravitational wake. It simply moved as if the laws of physics were polite suggestions it had chosen to ignore. And in Base 7, Ambassador Lena Cole was preparing to introduce the Council to a terrifying new concept: human science. Ambassador Lena Cole stepped off the human vessel and into Base 7 with the casual confidence of someone who had just parked a minivan, not rewritten fundamental physics. She was by Council standards disappointingly ordinary. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry. Carbon-based, no exotic sensory organs. No crystalline computation matrices, no quantum entangled neural clusters, just a human woman in a simple gray suit, carrying a briefcase that the station scanners absolutely refused to analyze. Every time the sensors tried to penetrate the case, they returned error messages that translated roughly to, I don't know what that is, and I'm not touching it. Director Jakara watched from the observation deck as Cole crossed the docking bay, flanked by 2 human guards whose armor somehow registered as both solid matter and probability fields simultaneously. Her biosigns are normal, Vorinth reported, manipulating holographic displays with increasingly frantic movements, heart rate, respiration, neural activity, all within expected parameters for a carbon-based life form. But what? There's a secondary reading underneath the biological signals. It's like she's running software She's cybernetically enhanced. No. Enhancement implies adding something. Artificial, this is different, her. Biological neurons are processing information at speeds that would require quantum computing architecture, but she has a normal brain made of normal neurons. For voice cracked director. Her synapses are firing faster than light speed should allow. On the bay floor, Cole had reached the reception committee. She smiled, a gesture the council's xenopsychologist had on file, as indicating friendliness, and extended her hand. Ambassador Krenel, being photonic and lacking physical form, politely generated a temporary hand. Analog from coherent light. Cole shook it. The contact lasted 1.3 seconds. In that time, every quantum computer in the station experienced what technicians would later describe as aggressive enlightenment. What just happened? Shakara demanded, as alarms blossomed across her console. She touched Sineal, stammered a technician. There was data exchange. Massive data exchange, terabytes per microcon, but not through any network we can detect. It was like he paused, checking readings that made his eyes widen. It was like she treated Krenel's photonic matrix as a natural USB port and just downloaded a greeting package. A greeting package, Dakara repeated flatly. Yes, it contains her credentials, Earth's complete historical database, 47,000 scientific papers, cultural overview documents, and he stopped. Director, it also contains the instructions for how she transmitted this information. Show me. The document appeared on the main display. It was written in perfect mathematical notation, comprehensible to any species with understanding of basic physics. Title read, Introduction to Quantum Consciousness Interfacing, a primer for species still using external computers. The observation deck fell silent. She treats data transmission as a handshake. Krenel's voice echoed through speakers, his photonic form flickering with what might have been shock. The way we would exchange names and greetings, except she's exchanging entire libraries of information casually, as a courtesy. Down in Bay 7, Cole was being escorted to the diplomatic chambers. She walked past sensor arrays that had been designed to analyze everything from quantum fluctuations to dimensional rifts. They all reported the same thing. Error, subject exists in too many states simultaneously to catalog the B. Diplomatic chamber was a marvel of council engineering, a space where 50 different species could exist comfortably with environmental controls that could shift gravity, atmosphere, and even localize time flow to accommodate everyone from methane breathers to beings who existed partially in subspace. Cole sat down in a standard chair, declined the offer of environmental adjustment, and opened her briefcase. Inside was a small matte black cube, roughly 10 cm per side. Every sensor in the room immediately screamed warnings. That device, Shakara said slowly, her voice transmitted through speakers since her aquatic form remained in a separate chamber, is producing impossible readings. Oh, this Cole lifted the cube with the care one might show a coffee mug. This is just our portable reactor. Powers the translation systems, life support, backup data, storage, the usual standard diplomatic equipment. That cube, Forthen said, his voice strangled, is reading as containing an energy density equivalent to a collapsing star inside 10 cubic centimeters. Cole blinked. Well, yes. It's an 11-dimensional quantum reactor. draws power from vacuum fluctuations. Across parallel probability streams, we figured out how to make them. Pocket-sized about 80 years ago, she smiled apologetically. Is it causing interference? I can switch to the backup. Sure. Cole reached into her jacket and pulled out what looked like a simple pen. This one's only 9-dimensional, less output but cleaner signature. The pen was generating enough power to run a planet. How? Shakara asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. How is this possible? We've had theoretical models for dimensional energy extraction for centuries. They all conclude it's impossible. The quantum foam instability alone would the instability. Cole's face lit up like she was discussing a favorite recipe. Yeah, that was the tricky part. We solved it by not trying to stabilize the quantum foam. Instead, we synchronized our extraction rate with the natural fluctuation harmonics. Basically, we surf the instability instead of fighting it. Surf, Vo repeated numbly. Exactly. Once we stopped treating physics like rules and started treating them like how to put this, like a really complex dance. Everything got easier. She pulled a small tablet from her briefcase, except it wasn't a tablet, it was a flat sheet of something that the sensors registered as organized thought given physical form. I brought some documents to share. Cole continued cheerfully. Complete specifications for sustainable fusion, quantum computing architecture, FTL, drive principles. And we included the mathematics for consciousness digitization. We figured that might interest the photonic collective since you're already halfway there. She looked around at the stunned faces and face equivalents of the council's greatest minds. Is this a bad time? Should I come back? Shakara's translator struggled to convey the mix of awe, terror, and existential crisis in her response. Ambassador Cole, she finally managed. How long did it take your species to develop these technologies? Cole thought for a moment. From industrial revolution to dimensionally transcendent, about 300 years, though we really didn't hit our stride until we stopped listening to people who said things were impossible. She smiled. Turns out the universe doesn't actually care about our opinions on what should or shouldn't work in the observation decks, in the analysis chambers across the entire station. The same thought echoed through 50 different species. They broke physics by not believing it could break, and the terrifying part, they were just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 hours. In 3,000 years of galactic governance, there had never been an emergency session that lasted more than 2. Let me ensure I understand correctly, Council Director Jakara said. Her tentacles nodded in a configuration that xenolinguists recognized as profound cognitive distress. You're telling us that your species achieved faster than light travel by asking nicely, Ambassador? Lena Cole nodded, seemingly oblivious to the fact that she just caused 47 different species to question their entire understanding of reality, while not exactly asking, more like negotiating with spacetime. See, we realized that the universe operates on information exchange at the quantum level. So instead of trying to break the light-speeded barrier, we just convinced local spacetime that we were already on the other side. Convinced, for repeated, his voice hollow. You convince spacetime, right? It's all about quantum Observation and probability collapse if you can manipulate the wave function to believe you've already arrived at your destination before you leave, then causality smooths itself out to match. The universe basically does the math for you, she said it the way one might explain how to boil water. Hi. Physicist Colin of the Zinthari Empire, a species that had spent 12,000 years mastering quantum mechanics, raised one of her 6 delicate hands. Her voice trembled. Ambassador Cole, what you're describing violates the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, the law of conservation of information, and causality itself. Oh, absolutely, Cole agreed cheerfully. It violates all of those if you assume they're inviolable. They're called laws of physics. I'm not sure, but who made those laws? Cole tilted her head. Universe, because from what we can tell, the universe is actually pretty flexible. It's got guidelines, not rules. Once we stopped treating physics like a legal code and started treating it like a really complex negotiation, everything opened up. She pulled up a holographic display from her organized thought tablet. Equations appeared, mathematics that made the council's greatest minds feel like children trying to read doctrinal thesis. This is our unified field theory, Cole explained. Took us about 40 years to crack it. Key insight was realizing that consciousness isn't separate from physical reality. It's a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. Once we understood that, observer effects stopped being weird quantum anomalies and became tools. You weaponized observation, breathed Krenel, his photonic form flickering with something between awe and horror. Not weaponized, utilized. Cole's correction was gentle but firm. We learned to actively participate in quantum collapse events. Every human with neural enhancement, which is most of us now, can influence probability fields just by thinking about them in the right way. Vor finally found his voice. That's magic. No, Cole said firmly. It's science we understand. And you don't yet, she smiled. There's a difference. Ambassador Thieler of the Krell Dominion, who hadn't spoken in 3 hours, finally stirred. The Krell were the council's eldest race, masters of dimensional mathematics. They had explored 11 dimensions while other species were still wondering why the sky was blue. Ambassador Cole Feller said, his voice like grinding stone. The Krell Dominion has existed for 67,000 years. We have mapped dimensions your species probably doesn't have names for. We have calculated the mass of collapsed realities and measured the decay rate of expired universes. He leaned forward, his crystalline eyes fixed on the human. How did you surpass us in 3 centuries? The chamber fell silent. Cole's expression softened. It wasn't pity, nothing so condescending. It was something closer to understanding. You want the honest answer? She asked quietly. Please, you stopped asking questions. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Every species in this council reached a point where they said, this is impossible, therefore we won't try. You hit walls and accepted them as boundaries. You found limits and called them laws. Cole stood, her movements slow and deliberate. Humans, we hit walls and got angry. We found limits and took them personally. She walked to the central holographic display where the impossible human ship still hung in space, casually violating physics. When our scientists said faster than light travel was impossible, we didn't accept We got stubborn. We threw everything. We had the problem, not because we needed FTL, but because the universe told us no, and humans hate being told no. That's insane, Borinth whispered. Maybe, Cole acknowledged, but it works. You know what our greatest scientific breakthrough was? Not the dimensional reactors, not the consciousness interfacing, not even the FTL drives. What was it? Jakara asked. We stopped respecting the word impossible. Cole's smile was almost sad. Every species here has scientists who say this cannot be done, and everyone listens. On Earth, when a scientist says something's impossible, 100 engineers immediately start trying to prove them wrong. When a physicist says we can't do something, we take it as a challenge. She returned to her seat. You asked how we did this in 300 years. The answer is simple. We never believed we couldn't. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Thieler spoke again. What do you want from us, Ambassador Cole? Nothing, Cole said simply. We're here to share the reactor specifications, the consciousness protocols, the dimensional mathematics. It's all yours, free, no strings. Why? Because 400 years ago you surveyed our planet. You decided we were primitive, that we weren't worth your time. Cole's expression remained neutral, but her words cut deep. You were right to wait, but not because we needed to develop. You needed to wait because you needed to be ready to learn from us. She stood gathering her materials. Humanity didn't break your laws of physics, Council. We just proved they were never laws to begin with. They were assumptions, comfortable assumptions that let you stop pushing, stop questioning, stop trying. Cole headed for the exit, then paused. Universe is infinite and strange and fundamentally weird. It runs on rules we barely understand, and every time we think we figured it out, we discover 7 new exceptions. She looked back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. You can spend eternity cataloging those exceptions and calling them impossible. Her smile was warm, almost kind. Or you can do what humans do, look at the impossible, laugh, and say, watch this. The doors closed. Behind her, in the chamber, 50 species sat in stunned silence, contemplating a terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't transcended physics. They'd simply refused to be limited by it, and in that refusal, in that stubborn, insane, beautiful human arrogance, they discovered what the ancient races had forgotten. The universe doesn't have rules, it has possibilities, and humanity had just proven that the only real limit was believing in limits at all. Epilogue. 3 months later, the Galactic Council formally requested that humanity establish an educational exchange program. The first lesson was titled Introduction to Productive Stubbornness. It was the most attended lecture in Council history and across the galaxy. In 1,000 laboratories, alien scientists began asking a question they hadn't asked in millennia. What if we're wrong? The universe has always waited patiently for them to find out. Because when you stop asking, can we, and start saying we did, reality itself learns to get out of your way.